A first assignment thing, it has like the structure that you want us to build. You don't want us to write like essays, you want us to just have question, answer.
Well, your answers should be in an essay format.
Okay, for each of the answers?
Yes. So, anywhere from 25 to 50 pages would be good. Let me say a couple of things about assignments. I know we're supposed to go over the syllabus, we never did, and it's really not important. But since we're here, did you get it? Yeah. There was a guy from France, Alexis de Tocqueville. He was commissioned by the French government to come to the US and kind of just get to know the country a little, get to know the prison system a little. He had the nicest things to say about the Native Americans, the Black Americans. But all that aside, he had some interesting ideas about writing. America had become very popular in a variety of different ways. Hello? But especially their printing press. The number of books and magazines and articles that would publish on a daily basis. I don't know if you've ever been to France or know much about their culture. They're very protective of their language. It's like a parent and a child. Parents are usually very protective of their kids, at least for the first couple days, before they become frustrated and just let them go. So the French would be very, very, very protective of language. If you look at, say, American dictionaries, every year you add 50 words to it. The things that never existed, like y'all, what it do, what up. These are bona fide words that people now use. And so he had come to realize that even though America publishes thousands of pages on a daily basis, they're just garbage. They're like Kim Kardashian and all the awful things you see on, social media. And he said this would have never happened in France. And one of the things you need to understand about writing, because we are social creatures in the sense that, from the moment you wake up to the time you go to bed, society just dumps on you all sorts of nonsense. And you have no choice but to just express them in some shape or form. It's the way we bathroom, vomit our emotions. Some of us do it through writing. And the truth is, what happens is, first you write because you want a grade, and rightly so. I mean, it's, without it, you can't graduate, you can't get ahead in life. So you write for a grade. You don't really understand what you're writing about, but you write nevertheless. And then you come to a place where you realize, well, maybe I should write for more than just a grade. And then you spill out your assumptions about this and that. You really have no understanding of anything you're talking about, you just write. And it may be that you're gifted to string words together in a very eloquent, articulate way, but there is basically zero understanding behind it. It's something I always tell my students. If I was to ask you to write about what it means to get old, I have no doubt that you would probably be able to write 50 pages. And though you may earn an A in that essay, the truth is you have zero understanding. Writing is an A, understanding is an F. Because the truth is your back doesn't ache. You haven't lost time, you haven't lost energy, you don't have the regrets that most old people have. But you write well. And so the writing becomes a makeup that, you're really ugly on the inside and outside, but you cover everything up with a good amount of makeup. You go to a party and there are all these men or women, chasing after you. They wake up next to you in the morning, the makeup is gone, they've licked everything off. and they realize, oh my God, you look like a truck. You know? And so what usually happens is you write because you assume that you know and you understand. And of course, being young, you have no choice but to be arrogant and cocky and all of that. And then life will break you at some point. It spares no one. And then what will happen is you'll have emotions. You had glimpses of those emotions in the past, but now they're like a tsunami all around you. And then you try to write them down, but the truth is your writing is so incoherent, and it's because your thinking is so incoherent. It's because your understanding is quite nil. You don't have much of it. And so you keep vomiting, and your friends say, I read your writing. What are you talking about? Maybe you need therapy. And then if you get to a place, if you're lucky, to gain enough maturity where you realize, yes, you have a lot of emotions, you don't understand them. Yes, your emotions are due to the past. Yes, your past has to do with a good amount of decision-making processes which you fail to pay attention. Then you fall into depression. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a very, very good thing. The West doesn't really know much about depression. If you want depression, you should visit places in Africa, India, Middle East. Depression basically becomes your main ingredient for creativity. It's not deemed negative. And then it'll take you some time to figure out why you're depressed, how you're depressed, what you can do with depression. And then all of a sudden something very interesting happens. If, again, you're lucky to get there, you will begin to write. And your writing has a good amount of history in it, good amount of pain in it, good amount of reflection in it, examination in it. Now when you write well. It's articulate, it's coherent, there's a good amount of detachment. The union between your intellect and your emotions are quite mature now. First, you write because you just feel. Or you write because you just think. At a certain point, you write because you feel, and your feelings have gone through thinking, reflection, and now you write. First, you write for yourself because it's fun. But because it is such a gift, and it's so rare for this to happen to any of us, then you want to share your gospel, whatever that may be, with other people. So when it comes to assignments and writing, just write, not because you know how to write, not because you know what you're talking about, write because you need a grade. And I'll give it to you. Do make some attempts in hopes to understand. You won't succeed because it takes a long, long time. But make the attempt nevertheless. Does that?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you read that stuff?
No. I'd rather watch porn. Anyone else?
50 pages a lot.
Yeah. Marquise, okay.
So you mentioned social media earlier. So
Yeah.
I want to know your opinion, like how you feel about social media right now and how it affects our society and our youth. And do you feel like it's like the death of us, or will it make us better in the future?
There was a guy in the 19th century, he was a student of Emerson. His name was Henry David Thoreau. I'm not quite sure if it was Emerson who said this or Thoreau, but that with everything new that comes into life, you lose something valuable as well. You're single, that's emotional poverty perhaps if you don't know what to do with it. You get into a relationship. Well, you lose something valuable, that's independence, to hang out with your friends, right? You gotta just say yes to your companion 99.99999% of the times, which is your gateway towards happiness, by the way. Is social media good? Sure, it has some benefits, but are we at a place where we can use it the right way? No, it's like anything else. You're poor, all of a sudden you have money. It's gonna take you some time to figure out what to do with it. So, yeah, that's all I gotta say for that right now. Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
So you're like an older guy, so like,
I'm sorry?
you're an older guy, so like,
Don't let that
is it
deceive
crazy,
you.
like seeing like the advancement of technology like right in front of your eyes, like you're watching it advance in real time. Or how do you feel about that?
Or did you expect it?
Oh, no. None of us expected any of this. But I must say that in the past 10 years, I think, maybe 15 years, people have changed. You know, when I first started teaching, I would ask my students, how many of you smoke weed? No hands would ever go up. How many of you watch porn? No hands would ever go up. How many of you have come from broken backgrounds or broken homes, parents divorced? No hands would go up. There was an element of shame, self-respect, if you want to call it that. Now, it doesn't really matter. When I ask people how many of you smoke, almost 90% of hands go up as if it's something to be proud of. How many of you watch porn? All the hands go up. You know, how many of you like break into other people's homes and just steal things? Everybody, you know. And so it's difficult to pinpoint when and how that change came about. You know, so. And life is far more complicated now than it was before. You know, if you were to say, go back, have you ever watched that movie, White Men Can't Jump? Or Jump Can't White Men?
Yeah, I know you're talking about Woody. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, Woody guy and that other guy. So there is a scene in the movie where he desperately wants some money to bet on a basketball game. So he wears his mask, takes out his gun, and goes to the shop. And the shop owner says, Johnny, is that you?
Yeah.
That you're living in a town, there is only 1 or 2 markets. There are no Costco's, there are no Safeways, cities are not 500,000 people where you walk in a crowd, but you walk as a stranger, you feel lonely and isolated. So when you have a city of, say, I don't know, 1,000 people, for the most part, everybody knows everybody. You can't walk into a shop and steal things. You're a known entity in your town. Every neighbor knows who and what you are. And should you do something, say, bad, it'll be told to your parents. And your mom, your dad will have no trouble spanking, smacking, kicking you in the face. That's just the way things used to work. But when you now live in a city as big as this, where no one really has to answer to anyone, it's a free-for-all, you know. So some of the important components that used to glue people together is no longer there. It's something that Aristotle had talked about some 3,000 years ago. This is not a city, it's a zoo. You know, and you let the lion out, the lion will devour the sheep. You let the sheep out, the sheep will eat the sheep are veggies, aren't they? They'll probably eat the lions. Anyways, so anyone else before we, yeah.
So I have a question. With social media, do you think he will always to control the people, the thinking? For example, you have a group of people, they have the same idea. They will use the thing, and if you express against his opinion or against his comment, then you will use the social media to campaign you, and then you stop your express your.
Sure. You know, going back to what Miles had asked, if you live in a town of, say, 500 people, there are only 2 or 3 or maybe 10 pieces of advertisement. You're a Christian, you're either a man or a woman, no sex before marriage, you don't drink, you don't smoke in public. That's all. And for entertainment, you either play soccer or you go to church. There are no other pieces of advertisement. Your heroes, they're not going to be Snoop Dogg. They're not going to be Miley Cyrus. It's Moses, Jesus Christ, your parents, your grandparents. That's it. And that's how you're controlled. You're controlled by only 10 pieces of advertisement. And should you cross any lines, the punishment will be severe. Now you have, on a daily basis, from what little I've studied, there are about 90,000 pieces of advertisement on a daily basis that bombards you. Every single day, 90 pieces. The buses are a billboard. There was a study done in one of the Super Bowls. I forget which one. It was done through Stanford. They wanted to know how gullible people are, or how much we can control people, or how much they could control people. So they said, during halftime, let's advertise on the big billboard, the Jumbotron, maybe nanosecond of Coca-Cola. Just come on, off. Within that half hour, the sales of Coca-Cola went up about 600%. Now, I'm sure that everyone who would get into their car and drive to a shop to buy themselves a six-pack, they would say, oh, this is my will. I am doing it. When in fact, it's not. You and I, and it goes back to Andrew's question the other day about, governance of oneself, being autonomous, which is Latin for being a law unto thyself. You have no choice but to be controlled. The question is, there is nothing wrong with being controlled, but who is controlling you? Imagine you have a son, okay? Now, your son could either be controlled by Eminem, or he could be controlled by you. Either way, as an animal, he needs to be controlled. Do you have a dog? You do? And one of the things about dogs is that you have to train your dogs. You have to tell them where to poop, where to go, where not to go. An untrained dog is an unhappy dog. Human beings are very much like that. Human beings need to be trained. And to be trained means to be controlled. So next time you walk into a classroom or you walk into a park and there are people out there who are just behaving to some extent like savages. They don't know when to shut up. They don't know that they need to raise their hand to ask a question. To some extent, they need to behave properly, but they don't. These are people who just have never been controlled. And they're poison to themselves or poison to any community they walk into. So it's good to be controlled. There's nothing wrong with it. The question is, by whom? And so one of the difficulties is when you come from, say, a past where you were missing a father, you're missing a mother. Well, there is a component that's missing. There is an element of control that's absent. And so, because we are emotional animals to some extent, and we desire meaning, and that meaning wasn't there, you have no choice but to be angry. It's pent-up, repressed emotions. And then it comes out in all the wrong ways. Yeah.
What if you don't have anyone to control you? Is there a way to, start the process of self-discipline?
Well, it's something we talked about in yesterday's class, and Josh was kind enough to kind of come there. And of course, Talia is just condemned. The topic we talked about yesterday in class was about regret. Leo Tolstoy wrote this novel, and I'm not sure why Russians have a tendency of writing big, fat novels, but they do. He wrote a book called The Death of Ivan Ilyich. Ivan Ilyich really is your story and my story, which is your parents tell you to go to school, and you do. Your parents tell you don't have sex before marriage, and you don't. They say get married to this particular person, and you do. Get a job, and you do. You do everything according to the book. And then there comes a point where you look at your life and you realize you're not satisfied, you're not happy, it's not working out for you. You followed all the rules. You stopped at all the stop signs and all the traffic lights, but for some strange reason, life has given you this big fat ticket. You're a loser. Okay? And you gotta kind of figure out what went wrong. And now you begin to reflect and you begin to have a good amount of regrets. I should have listened to my gut feelings, whatever that may mean, or my intuition, again, whatever that may mean. As the sort of animals that we are, we have no choice but to experience regrets. Now, when you say, is there a way, if you're missing this and you're missing this and you're missing this other thing, and you're left to your own devices, is there a way to hone my energies together? Okay. One of the best movies that kind of describes, to some extent, your question is Remember the Titans. You have the white guys, you have the black guys. Okay. And each group wants to play football. And they're passionate about football. And it's, I suppose, during the 1960s or so. And so Denzel Washington comes in as the maverick, as the black sheep. He's like a black coach in a white community. And the board doesn't know what to do. People don't know what to do. The players don't know what to do. But what you have is this uncontrolled emotions now. The blacks don't want to be there. The whites don't want to be there. They certainly don't want to be friends. And when they are roomed together, they begin to fight one another. They say all sorts of crazy things to one another. So what you have is untamed, unruly bunch of groups of people. Now, Denzel Washington is the magnet. He has charisma. He has experience. He knows what's going on. He is mature. And what he does is through football, no different than Nelson Mandela, where he used rugby to unite people. Denzel Washington in this movie, in this character, he unites people through football. That's how you control, you know. And the point I'm trying to make is the following. If you have come at a certain point in your life to realize that there is something wrong with you, first you go through life thinking that you're all that. You will, you know, the idea that let those without sin cast the first stone. Okay. When you're young, you're like that. You will never sin. You will never go wrong. And the word sin basically means missing the mark. What are we doing here? We're all here for one simple reason. If you cut all the layers away, we are here simply to be happy. That's it. And the word happy comes from the word hap. Hap. Which means luck. So you want to be happy, you better hope you're lucky. Okay? So no amount of work that you may do, it may bring you moments of satisfaction, moments of contentment, moments of joy. But happiness is something very, very different. Okay?
Amir,
Yeah.
what is this?
I don't know.
Philosophy? Are you like a little green, like a philosopher in a year?
Yeah, Aristotle Happiness.
So Aristotle Happiness?
Sure.
Can you write like a quote on the board or something?
I'm sorry?
Can you write the quote that we're reviewing from Aristotle?
The what?
Can we review, like, can you write a quote or like a statement of Aristotle on the board? Like,
Yeah, I just said it. Happiness.
just no, can you like do a whole statement?
No, just happiness.
No, like a statement.
No, I can't. It's just happiness.
This is the most oddest class ever.
It's okay. It's okay. It's a new relationship.
Like it's a bad class.
You can drop it.
I'm doing that.
Okay, good. Now,
What's so bad about it?
it's okay. No. Yeah, I don't like interaction. I don't like diversity. Now,
Yeah, it's a bad person.
so first you live your life. Let's just create a narrative. You have no mom and you have no dad.
I have both.
Good for you. Now, and let's say because you've had neither, you've had to kind of just figure out what to do on your own. Now, keep in mind, Abi, hello. Keep in mind that your parents usually happen to be the GPS of the basic things. How to eat your food, not to run when you're having food, not to talk when other people are talking, especially your parents. That sometimes when you throw a temper tantrum in an unsavory way, expect a spanking of sorts coming your way or a timeout. When you don't have any of that stuff, you rely on yourself. It's what Henry David Thoreau would call self-reliance. But in your case, it's in all the wrong ways. You don't rely on a GPS. I mean, imagine if you wanted to go to Meikade, which is a Persian restaurant in San Francisco. Okay? Now, there are two options you have. Before the advent of technology, when we would go to San Francisco, we had to ask like 1,000 people, have you heard of Meikade? And say, what is that? So a journey that now takes maybe no more than 25 minutes used to take us about 3 hours. What you do now, you are reliant on Google Maps. You just put the name in there and they'll give you direction. 10 minutes later, you're there. Okay. Now, you can either be reliant on other people, on darkness, confusion, frustration, stress, anxiety, or are you just being an ass? Or you can be reliant on Google Maps. Your parents initially are Google Maps. Okay. Now, in the absence of having the map, you do all sorts of things. And remember, we are the sort of animals that enjoy pleasure. We do everything for pleasure, everything. Okay. There comes a point where you realize that your pleasure has turned out to be painful. Initially, you want to overcome the pain, but you can't, because there's a great amount of history behind it. And without understanding the history, there is no way you can ever get over it. And then the moment you have pain, you ask, why am I going through this? You try to blame God, you try to blame your parents, you try to blame other people, but the truth is, you suck as a human being. You know, I had a friend many, many years ago. She was very attractive, but she didn't understand that with attraction comes a good amount of power. Kind of like Spider-Man. You know, with power comes responsibility. And she didn't know that because she is so, so beautiful everywhere she goes, she's like a candy. Okay? Everyone wants to have a lick. And so she went through maybe 20 different relationships. And she would always blame other people. It took her to be about 45, no longer that attractive, to realize she was the problem. And she was the problem because at the age of 17, she was engaged to be married. They went for a swim in a river, and her fiance was drowned. And she never recovered. Okay. So the way you tame emotions, be self-righteous, feel entitled, say all sorts of crazy things. Live your life. You will get caught. Now, then you have to see, witness, experience what it means to get caught and all the emotions that come with it. You will try to escape, you won't, not for too long at least. Then you will begin to have regret. And what you do, like the rest of us in this class, you will read books. You will maybe talk to your father about why you didn't have the capacity to listen. Maybe you'll go to church, maybe you'll go to AA, doesn't really matter. And the moment you begin to ask questions in a very earnest way, and questions have to have a good amount of pain inside them. Pain. You have to be broken to be able to ask the right question. And then you say, Dad, what do I need to do now? Now what you're saying is, I want a GPS. My own GPS doesn't work. I go back to, say, some of the comments I've made in the past few days about, for those of you who are interested in doing philosophy. Okay. So what are you going to do? You're like 20 years old in this sucky culture with all the advertisements that are just poison for the most part for you. But because the advertisements are so tantalizing, they're so glossy, they're so attractive, they're like traps. They swallow you. And you have no choice but to entertain yourselves in them. Okay? I mean, look, you buy a cell phone, right? Your monthly payment has dropped to maybe $20 a month. You're saving like $200. You're sitting and watching a movie, and all of a sudden there is an advertisement. AT&T has this brand new phone. It talks to you, dances for you, cooks for you, does everything for you. And you say, yeah, you know what? I want that. And you go to the shop and you buy the phone, and now your monthly bill is no longer 20, it's like 220. And that's how they catch you. And so since I look at you and I say, you have no choice, it's not even up to you, you're going to waste your time. You're going to waste your life. And you may not want to. Other people will help you waste your life. If that's the case, why don't you give it to me? Like me enough to give me your life for about 10 years. And if you do that, You will have your PhD by the time you're 30. Now that's a lot of power to have, man. And that power, by the time you're 30, is going to carry you for the next 40 years of your life. I have no idea if you know what I'm talking about. It's a savings account that you can always go back to. It'll carry you. And you don't have to be good once you're in the classroom. You can suck. But once in a while, you will be inspired. And that's good enough. And you can take care of your family, and that's good enough. And you will have the respect of some of your students, and that is good enough. Don't be greedy. You don't need to be Socrates. And if you reject this offer, what's going to happen is, well, you're going to go to other classes. That's a different set of advertisement. You're going to walk into society. They're going to give you a different set of advertisement. And depending on where you are, what your capacity is, you're going to gravitate toward something. And you better hope it's not going to waste your time. And there's a good chance that almost everything under the sun is going to be a waste of your time. What, you thought that this is the way I've been teaching for the past 30 years? Of course not. As time passes, you begin to realize certain things. And then you say, you know what? It's okay. It's good, but it's not that great. You walk in with a good amount of hope, but near the end, there's a good amount of despair. Because you understand things a bit better. Anyone else? Yes.
So in relation to like the fact that is everything basically like a reaction to something else? Like is action really like a thing as we see it, and then based on that is free will the same type of illusion as consciousness?
Okay, let me do something about free will, and then we're going to continue. Chandler, right? Okay. Oops. You have two equations, and getting this right will give you a PhD. Exercise your free will, exercise your intelligence. Which one are you going to choose? Number one or number two? You're going to choose this. I asked you to exercise your free will. See, there is no free will if you know what the right answer is. Free will happens when you have to decide. It's this or this. And you do so because you're confused. You don't know what's right. You don't know what's wrong. You have to guess. So does free will exist for the stupid? And by stupid, I don't mean like you're mentally deficient. You just lack experience. You don't know what's good for you. You don't know what the right answer is. So you wing it. Winging it is free will. Now there is another way you can explain free will. Go home and try to play the piano. Well, you can certainly walk on the keyboards, or bang on the keyboards. That's your free will. There is also another thing you can do. You can be disciplined for about 10 years, then at a certain point, and I don't know if you know the process. First, you got to learn how to read the notes. Then you got to follow the notes, and your teacher will smack you every time you do a misstep. And then the notes become more and more complicated. Then there comes a point after 10 years, if your teacher likes you and you have any talent about you, he or she is going to turn off the lights and remove the music sheet and says, Chandler, you've been at this for a while. I need you to improvise. Now, that's another form of free will, but it's governed on discipline, study, and now you improvise. And the way you improvise is you put 20 years of history from Chopin, Mozart, Beethoven, Snoop Dogg, you put all of them together, now you create music. But most of us aren't really that smart. We are not disciplined. We're not good at anything. We are mediocre. Most likely bad at everything.
So is discipline the true path to happiness?
Well, it depends, again, how you wish to define happiness. عشق در دریای غم غمناک نیست. Let me tell you a story about happiness. My brother teaches at American River College. He had a colleague, I forget his name, Snoop or Snook. He was a professor of anthropology, University of Texas, maybe, or South Carolina. He gets a news, his mother lived in a different state, that his mom has cancer. And she calls him and says, I'm not feeling well, can you come and take care of me? So he goes to his dean and says, I need to go on a break, take care of my mom. Fine. And it's not fun, especially if you have a great relationship with your mother, to watch her slowly decay. Okay. And after a while, of course, and Leo Tolstoy got this part wrong in The Death of Ivan Ilyich, but there comes a point where your compassion for your mom has now calcified a little. It's frustrating, it's stressful. She's become completely self-centered and self-involved, and rightly so, because that's what pain does. It's all about you. And perhaps deep down he was hoping for her to die. So it could be her release as well as his release. They can both be free. She didn't die. And because he loved his mother despite all the difficulties, he called his boss again saying, I need another semester off. Fine. She still remained alive.